I'm Caitlin Dryden, and this is Slut. I'm Caitlin Dryden, and welcome to Slut, the show where I question who is and what makes a slut. Gaby Herstik is our guest today, and she's a sex witch. And if you don't know what that means, it's pretty much as it sounds. She's a witch that specializes in sex and sexuality. But she's also an author and has written 6 books, and she only turned 30 just a few weeks ago. Her latest novel, Goddess Energy, comes out on March 24th. In it, she teaches us how to create and maintain a relationship with the goddess that is transformative, empowering, and personal. She writes about the history of the goddess and the various different archetypes of them, like Lilith, Venus, Isis, and Babylon, and teaches us how to work with ritual, tarot, journaling, and affirmations to attune to goddess energy. Okay, so I know what a lot of you are thinking, that this is some weird-ass LA shit, and you may not be interested in it, but please stay with us, because I think even if you are an atheist or think that this spiritual stuff is a load of crap, you are going to get something out of this conversation and her work. I was raised agnostic and I've never been to church, so I don't have the religious trauma that a lot of people do, I think, in our world today. And I actually think that's what makes me so good at talking about sex, because I come at it from a more balanced perspective. And so, I've always identified as agnostic. Like I said, I've never been to church. I was never baptized. But as I've gotten older, I've gotten more into spirituality. I like to meditate. I have different personal rituals for myself. But I have always felt an intense aversion to the word God and goddesses. So when I heard that her book was called Goddess Energy, I'll admit I was a little bit hesitant, just because I guess I don't know what is my big aversion to the word. I think I just attribute it to, a higher power, a male hierarchical power that I just don't relate to. And so I have kind of camped goddess into that as well. And I think sometimes, you when you do see the annoying spiritual people, they can go on about goddess and all this stuff. And you're like, oh my God, this is a lot. Let's just chill out. So I think that's where it comes from. But I put all of my feelings about God and goddesses aside when I read this book. And honestly, it was really transformative for me. I love the way Gaby approaches the goddess, because she teaches us about their history and how to call upon their powers when we need it. I also like it because she teaches us that there's not one way to have a relationship with the goddess, and you can call upon any goddess that feels right to you. So that could be some controversial goddess like Lilith, or it could even be Venus or Lakshmi. And these are all different goddesses from various religions. And what she really emphasizes, which I like, is that your relationship to the goddess is between you and nobody else. So you can create whatever relationship that you want. And I like that. So if you are one of those people like me who, is agnostic, or maybe atheist or atheist agnostic, or just has an aversion to God. And also, even if you think, witchcraft and spirituality is all a bunch of hokey bullshit, I do think that there's a psychological effect that witchcraft has, and doing certain spells have, that benefit you, because it basically forces you to cast out negative energy in your life and bring on protection, and also bring in energy to help you complete your goals. So, like I said, we don't just talk about sex, magic, and magic in this episode. We also discuss her sex work, her non-monogamous relationship, and most importantly, at the end, her grandmother, Rose. I think this is the perfect episode to accompany the one that I released a few weeks ago on Valentine's Day, where I talked about open relationships and Molly Roden Winter's book More. And I was pretty critical of that book. And we looked at the ups and downs of open marriage. You know, I think that Gaby is in a healthy non-monogamous relationship. So I think it was really cool to hear her experience and compare it to what we were just talking about a few weeks ago. Before we get started, you can pre-order Goddess Energy wherever you get books. And the book officially comes out on March 24th. If you want to check out Gaby while we have this talk, her Instagram and Twitter is at Gaby Herstik. Oh, and also she has a podcast called Love, Lust, and Magic. You should listen to that right after this. Also, while we're here, make sure that you're subscribed to Slut wherever you're listening to this right now and rate it 5 stars. And if you're also enjoying the show, leave a review and give a comment, give a like. And to those of you listening on Apple Podcasts, I seriously need you to stop what you're doing right now because 77% of you are not subscribed. So I need to get that up. So if you could hit that subscribe button, that would be great. And I know this all feels really silly and annoying, and you hear me talk about this every week, but it's just how the show is going to grow. Also, make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, and you can watch this episode on YouTube and on Spotify. You can also follow me on Instagram at Caitlin Dryden and at Slut Podcast, and on TikTok at SLT Pod. Links to all that and much more are in the description to this episode. So sluts, sit back, relax, and charge your vibrators for later. Gaby Herstik is up next. Gaby, you are an author and a columnist, but most importantly, you are a witch. I read that every day you pull a tarot card and then dress yourself based on that card. So I thought that I would try that for the first time today, and I pulled the Magician.
Love. Oh my God, I see it.
Do you see it?
With, like the oranges. I see it with kind of like the flowy dress instead of like the cape. And I feel like with like the gold jewelry, it's kind of embodying that like solar energy.
That's what I was trying to do.
Love
Exactly.
it.
What is the Magician?
So the Magician is the second card in the tarot deck, but it is the first like card in the major arcana. It's number 1 because the Fool is 0. So the Fool represents the cosmic void, the potential of everything. The Fool is like stepping into a new paradigm, and the Magician is about working with all of the elements at your disposal, your physical body, your surroundings, your emotional body, your purpose, your passion, your will, your heart, and all the tangible things and intangible things in your life to manifest, create, and shapeshift. The Magician really shows us how we are in our power and how we have the ability to control our life and our destiny by honoring the different tools that we have. But it can also represent this kind of like this egoic, like know-it-all energy. It kind of has to be paired, I feel like, with the curiosity and the joy and the wonder of the Fool to really like evolve. But the Magician is a really great card. It is the card of true will. It is the card of the occultist who works with the elements of earth, air, fire, water, connected through spirit to transform and evolve.
And you know, it's funny enough, I also pulled a second card to represent like what our conversation was going to be like today, and it was the Fool.
Oh my God, I love it.
Yeah.
Which I also kind of see with your outfit with like the different patterns and stuff.
Exactly.
I love it. So the Fool and the Magician are like beginnings, and also like having the energy of like being a student first, of like always learning, and of like taking what you are passionate about, taking your curiosity and allowing that to guide you, and allowing the different parts of your life to support that. So the Fool is really exciting. He's like maybe like a tiny bit naive, but just like excited. Like they're really like, it's like the chaos and potential of nothingness to become everything. And then the magician is kind of like taking that from the cosmic void and like working with the actual like energy of that to transform and manifest.
I think that's a good place to start our conversation. So since 2018, you have written 3 books on witchcraft and 1 guided journal. But right after the spring equinox on March 24th, your 4th book comes out, and that book is called Goddess Energy. You said that, quote, writing this book has been the biggest blessing of my life. What is Goddess Energy about, and what are you trying to accomplish through it?
Not to like brag on myself, but this is actually my 6th book.
Okay, it is your 6th book. Okay, so where am I missing these books?
The first one is Inner Witch, which came out in it was like 5 years ago. So whatever time, 5 years ago in March. And then
2018, I think.
Yeah, and then Bewitching the Elements came out in 2020. And then my guided journal, Embody Your Magic, came out. And then Sacred Sex came out in July. And then my tarot deck came out came out in September.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, Goddess Energy is about feeling. It's about the heart. It's about connecting to the energy of creation, of the divine erotic, the energy of that creates and sustains life that we all have a connection to. So for me, the goddess is both a deity and faces of a deity that are connected to the earth and her cycles, our own cycles, our heart, our power. It is something that is felt in the body and embodied versus just like thought of. The goddess is in everything. The way that I view the goddess is very like what I would consider tantric, in the way that everything is the goddess. I'm the goddess, you are the goddess, our puppies are the goddess, and even trash and, you know, cremation grounds. And I always think of like the giant pile of trash floating in the ocean, like even that is of goddess, because everything is of goddess, whether or not it's like we consider it right, like good or bad, because the goddess defies those distinctions.
I remember you saying that even like the most evil and vile things can be the goddess or is the goddess.
Which is like one of the things I say all the time is you can't think your way to the goddess. Like you can't. It's a feeling. It's an expression in like your body. And there are things that seem like really kind of contradictory, both in goddess worship, goddess energy, and in magic. And like, I feel like that's one of those things that like, even the things that we find vile and disgusting are divine, because everything is divine, because everything is of the goddess.
How do you understand that binary in your own life?
I feel like for me, I am not so worried about being like a good person versus a bad person. It's more of like living within like my own structures of like what I believe is right and like my own kind of path. And it means accepting my shadows and my fears and my anxiety and my jealousy and my judgment as like divine, just like my light. I really think of like goddess energy of connecting the heavenly, the underworld, and like, or the heaven and the underworld through like the earth, which is like the body. Like, I don't want to get too far off track, but this idea of like the parts of ourselves that are like light and pure and love, and the parts of ourselves that are like shadowy and dark and deep and angry, like those can find balance when we integrate them within ourselves, within the body, and like not reject our body as like something evil or vile, like especially when it comes to something like sexuality. So for me, goddess energy is a way of being in this frequency of feeling, of embodiment, of intuition, and of like unconditional love and lust. That's really kind of how I feel it. Like it's something that's, again, like it's not just something that you can like read, it's something that you experience, but it's a frequency and a way of being in tune with each other and all of life that you can connect to, regardless of if you're, you know, like your gender or your biology or like whatever. It's a frequency we can all turn like our inner radios to. And for me, like that is a way of aligning ourselves with something greater. It's a way of aligning ourselves with compassion for each other, because when you see that everybody else is divine as you are, like, it just fosters that compassion naturally.
And also, I feel like if we deny the shadow parts of ourselves and only, I guess, for lack of a better word, like only look at the light, that throws us out of balance in our lives. So you have to integrate both of those, your shadow and your light in your life.
Exactly. And I feel like, like you can't deny one emotion or one part of yourself without shutting yourself off from feeling the other things. Like if you're denying your anger or your sadness or your pain or whatever it is, like if you shut that off, you're shutting yourself off from like joy and love and bliss, because they're all connected. Like there's this kind of, there's a very well-known axiom in the occult space. It's as above, so below.
What's axiom?
Like axiom is like a phrase or like a, what's a word? Not like a cliche, but like a phrase or like a quote that's kind of like well-known. So like it just, this idea of like as above, so below, as within, so without, like the macrocosm is this reflection of the microcosm. So like an example of that is like when, for me, like one of the beliefs I have is that like I am of the goddess, and like we are physical manifestations of the divine here to have a human experience, because the divine does not have a physical body. It does not feel pleasure in the same way we do. So like we are expressions of the divine coming down here to like have this life, this is full life with pain and pleasure and everything in between. And like just like we, like I pray to the goddess, like I also feel like the goddess needs me. Or like this idea of like you look like at like the iris of an eye, it's like a reflection of like the galaxy, right? Like there's like parts of the galaxy that look like eyes, like all these kind of different things. And the phrase as above, so below, as within, so without is kind of like a chopped up part of it's a part of the Hermetica, of the Corpus Hermetica, which is like kind of like a ancient Greek series of books that come out of when Greece and Egypt and Alexandria was happening back in the day. I'm really chopping up the history, but there's this other kind of idea that comes out of this like Hermetic work that is that opposites are extremes of the same thing. So like if you think of hate and love, like it's the same energy but on opposite ends of the spectrum. I kind of understand like duality in that same way, where like these things that we think of as like good or evil or like binary, like they're just actually like different poles of the same expression.
Interesting. Throughout the book, you teach readers about the various different archetypes of the goddess, but there's one in particular that I want to talk about, and it's Venus, the goddess that you were first devoted to. And I was wondering if you could read this passage from your book.
Yeah, I love this, like on physical paper too. I pledged myself to Venus in December 2016, and my love for her has only grown, deepened, and evolved since then. It is around the time I began working with Venus that I started to see my power in my sexuality and in my body. I built a shrine for her in my room, and I began offering up my orgasms and exploring my erotic self with reverence. I began to see myself and my body as a living temple to Venus, and I began treating myself as such. This not only helped my self-esteem and confidence, but also helped me release comparison and envy to others. My self-expression is special and sacred, and quite frankly, it's between Venus and myself and no one else. Over time, my exploration of kink and BDSM became part of my magical practice as well. I started incorporating wax play, dripping body-safe candle wax on skin, and erotic rope bondage into my rituals. I found a sacred rhythm in impact play and incorporated conscious submission as a tool in my devotion. I saw Venus not only as a protector and guardian of my heart, but also my muse. She became a patron of my sexual exploration, my sex magic, and my exploration of kink and submission. Over the years, Venus has held me. She has helped me see myself as an embodiment of love and lust. She has whispered in my ear when things are falling apart, when my heart is broken, and when I feel lonely and scared. She has brought me back to myself by reminding me that the greatest magic you can offer yourself is becoming a vessel for love.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Can you take us back to when you first started working with Venus? What did that look like, and how did you find her in yourself?
When I was first discovering witchcraft, I was 12 or 13, and my exploration of witchcraft and my devotion to the goddess are linked. Like, I found witchcraft, found the goddess at the same time, and like just found my home like in that part of my spirituality right away. And when I started my practice with witchcraft, I was Wiccan, which is a religion that is under the term, like under the umbrella of like witchcraft, but you don't have to be Wiccan to be a witch. You don't have to be a witch to be Wiccan, although most Wiccans are witches. Anyway, I'm not Wiccan anymore, but at the time in Wicca, there's this concept of having what's called a matron goddess, which is like the goddess that you're pledged to. You have like usually a matron goddess and a patron god. So like a god and a goddess that are like at the center of your devotion. And I wasn't, and I'm still not devoted to or pledged to them. Like, my work and my life is in service to the goddess. That's just like my path.
Feels right.
Yeah, you know, I'm like, I didn't get enough. Like, I worship the god when I'm sucking dick. Like, I don't need to do that in my magical practice, you know? Anyway, I was like 12, and I was like a late bloomer with my sexuality. Like, I was not even like, I was prepubescent at this point.
You didn't have your first kiss until you were 18, right? Yeah.
So, you know, everybody's path is their own. And I was, just like, I also like didn't have my period until like the last day of freshman year of high school. Like, I just was not, I've always done things my own way. So I like was asking every night to have dreams of my matron goddess. And I remember having this dream.
This is when you're 13.
This is when I'm 12 or 13.
Okay.
Yeah. And I had a dream about Aphrodite, and she told me she was my matron goddess. It was either Aphrodite or Venus. It was one of them. And to me, they're different expressions of the same goddess. One's Roman and one's Greek. But yeah, I had a dream about Aphrodite, and I was like, nope. Absolutely not. I was just like so not in tune with my sexuality. I was not there yet. And I just like shoved it in a corner in my brain. And I honestly forgot about it for like probably almost a decade. And when I was a senior in college, I had a fashion blog for years and years. I was either a junior or a senior, and I started doing these series of like blog posts on outfits inspired by tarot cards. And then I began working with lingerie and using glamour magic as a part of that. And that naturally kind of led me to Venus. I think I just like had friends who worked with her, and I just seen her. And when I was a senior in college and my parents had moved to San Diego. I went to school in South Carolina, and I was visiting them. And I remember doing this photo shoot with my sister at the beach in this like black halter. This
is your twin sister, Alexandria, right?
Yeah, Alexandra. She takes all the photos from my books and all my promo photos, and she's amazing, and we love her. So she's like my personal photographer pretty much. So, which is so convenient.
She does great stuff. I'm jealous. I need a personal photographer.
Right? Like literally, you deserve it. I mean,
do.
Who needs an Instagram husband when you have a twin sister, you know?
Exactly.
Who's an incredible photographer.
You guys are identical twins?
We're fraternal.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So who came first?
She did it by 3 minutes, and we thought we were identical because the doctor told us we were identical, and like our placenta was like fused, which like can make it look like there's one placenta, which signifies that you're identical. And the technology back in like the 90s was just like not as good now. So we were like 11 and took a blood test and found out we were fraternal, and we're like, that makes sense, but also sad.
Yeah. We can pretend that for the sake of this podcast.
I'm honestly glad we're fraternal, because it would be a lot harder for me if we looked exactly the same. Like, I like looking like my own person.
Yeah. Does that mean that your astrology is exactly the same then? Interesting.
It's so weird because like we're so different. Like, I really feel like your soul is like what awakens your birth chart. So it's like even though we have the same birth chart, like it's expressed very differently. So I remember doing this photo shoot. This was in 2015 or 2016. And I did this photo shoot like on the beach in San Diego, side boobs out, like lie on rocks as a devotion to Venus. And that is when I began working with her. And it's funny, like I feel the same way about like Venus and sex magic, where like I couldn't tell you where like it started. It just kind of like happened. I've always loved like taking photos of myself. I've always loved glamour. Like my background, my degree in college is in fashion merchandising and print journalism. Like
you had a PR internship at Vivienne Westwood.
My queen, R.I.P. I love her so much. I moved to LA to work with her and I just stayed here. So yeah, my background is in fashion and fashion writing, and I just like naturally incorporated that into my magic. And with Venus, I feel like that was how it started. And then once I discovered kink, it really deepened. I had been dating somebody. We had gone like on a few dates and explored kink. And then, you know, I'd wanted more. He didn't want more. And he was really the only partner I'd had who was like, had a dom and was like in the kink scene. And when we stopped seeing each other, it felt like I had been like led into this world, but then the door had swung shut. And I realized I could, you know, wait around and hope for a partner who is kinky, or I could become my own lover and like really devote myself to giving myself the experiences that I wanted somebody else to give me. So for me, that meant like tying myself up and learning about impact play and like doing wax play. And I started taking classes like at the Pleasure Chest and reading books, and like found a community of like, found my, you know, kinky community. And that led me to, you know, like other things and other partners. But it was really like it was a year of really intense devotion to myself and to being there for myself in the way that I wanted other people to be there for me. And through that, like that became a devotional act to Venus. And I like wrote a series of poetry. Like I accompanied like I called them selfie portraits because they were like on my phone, but they were self-portraits of myself, like close-ups of different parts of my body and lingerie with like flowers. So like I'd have like a bra and I'd put flowers in it, or like, you know, like undies or whatever, and put flowers in it, like tights. And I would channel these poems, and I called them love letters from Venus. So like for me, like my creative work and my erotic expression are like ways that I honor the goddess. And the more that I did that in like this intentional way in the sacred space, the more I also like felt like, you know, like I became her, I became the goddess. And that's one of the things that like one of the last chapters in Goddess Energy is about embodying the goddess. Because it's one thing to like honor her, have an altar, learn about her myths. Like that is kind of like the picking up the phone and dialing it. But like to have the conversation with the goddess is a way of like being in her energy, like living in goddess energy, becoming a vessel for her. And that's why I say like the magic you offer yourself, like becoming a vessel of love, to me, like that is the most potent love spell that you can do, because it's like you're already on that wavelength. And from there, it's just like, it doesn't matter if there are other people that are worshiping you, because you're worshiping yourself. I love this quote about love from the book. You say, defining love is difficult because it is both elusive and temporary, permanent and fleeting. Love always exists, but the way you experience it changes based on your circumstances, your relationship with yourself, and the other of your affection. And something I just want to hold on for a second is that you're talking about how you had to find self-love and self-lust, as you write about in the book, within yourself after having some lovers not work out. And I remember listening to interview with you, and you were saying that you felt a lot of shame in your life because you didn't have a partner or a boyfriend or a girlfriend for a really long time. And that's something I relate to. Like growing up, I didn't have a serious boyfriend until this past year, and we're no longer together. And I always felt a lot of shame around that. And then when I got a boyfriend, I was kind of like, this is it. This is like, this is what everybody has been kind of seeing you not as worthy for, not having. And it really didn't change who I was. Yeah. So I guess, how did you release that shame and no longer feel like unworthy for not having that? Yeah, that's such a good question. And I totally understand that. And I feel like a big part of it is honestly that like at least like in America and Western culture, like there's such an emphasis on partnership, and there's an emphasis on like being in a romantic relationship. And for me, like I am a Mexican Jew, so like both of my cultures, like both my mom grew up in the Jewish community in Mexico City, and I'm just as Ashkenazi as you get. But
yeah, her parents fled Poland.
So my mom's dad migrated from Germany, and then my mom's, so like my great grandma, like my mom's grandma came from Poland.
Okay.
So yeah, and then my dad was born in Israel, and his parents were both in the concentration camps, and
he's a rabbi.
Yeah, he's a rabbi. He's retired now, but he's always going to be a rabbi because rabbi means teacher. So both of his parents were from Slovakia. So it's confusing, but yeah, there's a Jewish community in Mexico City because Mexico is like, yes, you can come be safe with us. But both of those cultures are there's a lot of affection and intimacy and like love. Like they're both like Latin culture and Jewish culture are very much like Italian culture. Like family is really, really important. So for me, like I had this example of like, there's so many different kinds of love. And like, I've always been somebody who's had a really small circle of like really, really close friends and like very deep intimacy with them, like very deep platonic intimacy with like my besties and like very like close loving relationships, affectionate relationships with like my family and like my sister and
I feel
my
the same
friends.
way. Yeah.
And like for what I realized, and I think what helped me heal that wound of like not being enough because I'm not partnered, is that like our society is like built on this idea of like the relationship escalator of like you have a boyfriend, you go to college, you get married, you have kids, you work the same job. And like I'm super Aquarius, like doing the expected path has never been resonant with me. Like I've known since I was young that like I've just had to be myself or I would like be miserable trying to fit in. And realizing that like I don't do what other people do was like kind of just something that freed me from like that expectation. And it took a long time, and I feel like I now have a boyfriend and we've been together for, it'll be 2 years in May, but we're non-monogamous. And I feel like for me, like a big part, I think, of what made me feel shameful and pressured was this like kind of like monogamous culture of like this one person's going to be your everything and you have to do everything together and like you're not allowed to do anything else. And like I'm not like that. Like I've always, since I was like younger, like been flirting with multiple people and like loved like being slutty and like now do different forms of like sex work, and like those are all kind of different expressions of like my truth. And being in a relationship that's like non-conventional, where like my boyfriend has a wife and like they live together, and like I love that because like I'm not trying to get married anytime soon. I'm not trying to move in with anybody. Like I haven't met his family, he hasn't met mine, and like I'm honestly happy about that. Like it's just
why are you happy about it?
Just because like that those things like aren't important for me. Like for me, when you involve other people, like when you involve family, like it just like other people's opinions get involved. You know, like I recently told my parents about having a boyfriend, and I felt like I couldn't just leave out that he was married and that we were non-monogamous. And they obviously they're older. Like my parents are in their late 60s, early 70s, and like they didn't understand it and didn't really like respect it the way I wanted to. And it was kind of validating because I had that feeling that that's how it was going to be, but like I felt like I needed to tell them. And
how did that make you feel though?
For me, what happened was that my parents fixated more on being married than asking about how our relationship was, how long we've been together. Like, because he's the best man I've ever dated and has healed so many of my man wounds by just showing up and like being this kind, incredible person. And like, we both have like very secure attachment. Like I feel very safe and cared for in a way that like I've never felt in like dating anybody or any situationship. And for them to just, which I get, hyper fixate on like him having a wife. Like I was just like, oh yeah, like I was right. And like, I didn't have to tell them. Like there was, I want to tell them because I know my mom was like, my mom just wanted me to be in love. Like, I think she felt like I was missing out.
Yeah.
But then when I told her, it was just like, it was its own thing, and it is what it is. But I think that for me, like part of the reason that I felt shame was because I knew that I wasn't going to fit into the stereotypical model of what a relationship's going to be. Just because I'm also like a very, like, I write about witchcraft and sex and like lead kinky rituals and like do weird shit for a living, you know? Like, I'm not ever going to work a 9 to 5. Like, I'm not going to like, you know, so it's really difficult. It's weird. But like, I feel like now, like, I feel like shame is one of those things that it's like, I really think of it like as a spiral. Like when you kind of release the shame or the guilt or whatever, which guilt, oh God, being Jewish, Latina mom, the Jewish guilt, it's just, you know what? It is in my bones. It's fine. We're learning, we're working with it. But I do feel like it's a spiral where it's like, you know, like you feel shame about being too much or not enough. And then you heal that. And then you come back to that same point and it's there, but it's like you're like at a higher level of it and it's not as strong. And it's just like you kind of just have to keep going. Like you're never going to completely get rid of the shame because most of it's not even ours. It's society or our religion or religious institutes or our doctors telling us that we're quote unquote dirty, or that if we have too much sex, then we're, you know, sluts. But if we don't have enough sex, we're prudes. And if we like, there's just so much mixed messaging. It's like, I think for me, like unraveling what I believed and like recognizing my own internal like slut shaming or lack, like whatever prude shaming, like helped me kind of just be like, doesn't actually really matter. And like what matters is like that I'm honest with who I am and what I want, and like I'm not gonna take shit. And honestly, I feel like a big part of the healing for me at least is like I turned 30 in 2 weeks, actually like exactly two weeks from today. And I'm just like, I feel the biggest way that I can tell I'm almost 30 is because I just will not take shit from men the same way I took it when I was in my early 20s. Like I'm not here to like let a man make me feel bad or make me feel anxious. Like, not to say that's like not perfect. Like, of course that can happen, but like, anxiety like, just is something that is, it's a feeling that that happens. But it's also, I think for me with men, it's like giving I'm not here to give my power to any man. You know what I mean? Unless it's like we've agreed upon it, negotiated and consented upon. You know what I mean? Which it's still in me. And I think too, like a big way that I've learned to step into that is by claiming the title of submissive, because when you're submissive and you're actually exploring BDSM and kink in like in a real way that's not like abusive, there is negotiation, there's consent, there is clear understanding that like I'm surrendering my power to you right now, but like if I want to stop or if I want to transform the situation, like I'm calling the shots with the power comes back to me, you know? So and recognizing that I am submissive showed me the ways that in my day-to-day life I was taking that role unintentionally. So it was a way for me to kind of just renegotiate my life and how I was engaging in, you know, like unconsensual power dynamics in daily life, because as women, unfortunately, we're thrust upon those things every day. Something I want to talk about is your alter ego and your shadow side, which is Dark Venus. And that's also, do you call it a erotic oracle now? They're kind of different. So erotic oracle is my like OnlyFans kind of alter ego. Okay. But they're pretty similar. They're pretty similar. So this is like how you do your sex work, right? So how did you, through Dark Venus and doing your sex work, how did you release your internalized slut shaming? Yeah. So erotic oracle is one expression of my sex work. The other is if you know, you know. And that is, I haven't come out with that stuff, but it'll happen sooner or later. But we'll be patiently waiting when you are ready. Yeah. I feel like a big part of it was just like recognizing that like I've always been an exhibitionist when it comes to my body and my expression. Like I have always loved, like I remember being like 5 and like wearing like tiny outfits and like, not that I was like sexual or like being sexualized, but like I remember just like loving showing my skin. And like I was in high school when I started my fashion blog, and I remember like taking photos in this like little crop top and like these like little shorts, and just like I've always felt really connected to my sexuality through my self-expression. Like that has always been a part of myself. And I started my OnlyFans in October of 2020. So it's been over 3 years. And when I first started it, it was like collages that I was putting on my Erotic Oracle Instagram. Like originally I started that account because I wanted to make an Oracle deck, and it was like literally the very beginning of quarantine, and I was like, okay, for every day of quarantine I'm gonna make a collage, thinking it was gonna be like 2 weeks, 40 days, you know what I mean, like not realizing how long it was gonna last. I made, I think, 70 collages in a row, like, and then I was like, I can't. And I started, like, I've just always loved lingerie. Like, I've always loved lingerie.
What's your favorite thing to wear?
Honestly, it changes a lot, and right now I'm kind of still figuring out my favorite, but like probably like a really, really tiny bikini, like a micro bikini, like little tiny thong and some like thigh high boots or some pleasers.
Hot, yeah, classic.
Yeah, you know, like whatever. Or like I also love like a set with like a garter belt and thigh high stockings. Like I love a garter belt. So like for me, like my connection with Venus and my exploration of kink, and also like my glamour and my lingerie, like that was a way that I adorned myself as a temple to her. And when I started these collages, like I wouldn't be like my tits wouldn't be like out. Like I had, you know, like I would always censor, because also Instagram hates sluts, so we have to.
They really do. I know that.
So fucking annoying. It's like Elon Musk fucking sucks.
And you know what? Elon Musk loves sluts.
Exactly. It sucks. But
and so does Mark Zuckerberg.
He does, but it's like Mark censors people, but like doesn't deal with like that isn't accepting of like transphobes and racists, and like Elon like likes sluts but hates like trans people and like loves racists. So it's just like a lose-lose situation. All that to say, I miss being on Twitter because you could really post the slut stuff. But I just can't.
It's a mess now, and there's so many bots as well.
It just sucks.
Nuts.
But for me, like when I started my account, like I was posting these collages, and it's like I should just like start an OnlyFans so I can post more that are like a little bit sluttier. And like at that time, like I wasn't even like showing my boobs and like wasn't showing my pussy. And like something that's really common when you start like doing kind of like sex work / content creation is that your boundaries change. So like I now put partnered stuff up. Like I'll put videos of myself like masturbating, like I'll put full, like I don't have the same boundaries that I had back then. And a big part of my internalized slut shaming was that I felt like it would ruin my career. Like even though I at the time like had been writing a book called Sacred Sex and had been focused on that, like I was still scared that like if my editor found that like I had an OnlyFans or like because I'd been doing other sex work before that, like and that was also part of the reason I started an OnlyFans. Like I was doing in-person sex work, and like once the pandemic started, I was like, I can't do that, but I still want to connect to this part of myself and like make some money. So I started this OnlyFans, and I was just like so terrified that like I would get my books canceled, or like I would be canceled, or like whatever.
Did anything like that happen? No,
not at all. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't even like explicitly talk about sex work in any of my like books, but I do like in some of my classes, like if I'm teaching something that's like related to like kink or something, like I'll talk to the class about my experience because it feels relevant to be like, I'm literally like, I do this, like, but I feel like a big part of it was like just accepting that it's who I am. And I feel like part of it is I don't want to center myself in the conversation with sex work because I am an able-bodied white woman. Like we don't need more voices like me, like being like front and center. But I also recognize that like I'm really like I think that everybody should have the option to make money how they want to make money. Like it's fine if somebody's an actress and also like as a waitress, or is, you know, like a writer that has to like work at a coffee shop, but for some reason if you like do some kind of sex work to support yourself, you're like, you know, shamed, like, or at least that's the perception. So for me, like I just had to come to terms with the fact that like this is something that like to me is also part of my devotion to the goddess. Like my sex work, whether it's erotic oracle or the other stuff I do, is in devotion to the goddess Babylon, who is I write about, who is the holy whore, who is a goddess of non-duality, who is a goddess of sexuality. And like for me also Venus, like erotic oracle is like a way for me to create myself into art and to express my sensuality, and like that I'm devoted specifically to the goddess of love and lust. So this is all part of that
encompasses,
you know.
How is both of how are both of those goddesses present when you're doing sex work in person?
Yeah. So for me, it's like when I was doing some specific stuff, like I literally would like visualize myself feeding this energy that I was raising in sessions to Babylon. And I made a specific sigil that I had, and like part of my name is like connected to her. And I literally very intentionally kind of channeled that energy to her. And I've also done a lot of rituals specifically where I've like asked her for protection, for guidance, for like asked her to be my patron, like, or my matron goddess, and that kind of like I've done stuff where I've made sigils and worked with like needle play and like offered her my blood, or like created, like done candle spells for protection and prosperity. And like I've done that with all these like with different goddesses based on like the different kind of sex work I'm doing. So it starts off as kind of something very like literal where I'm doing a ritual, or like I'm like doing in-person work or filming a video and I'm like connecting to the goddess. But the more that you like create that almost like pathway, then I feel like I don't have to be as like intentional, because it's just like part of the expression.
Present in your day.
Yeah.
How do they protect you when you're doing this work?
I feel like it's just kind of like guardian angel vibes. Like just like one of the goddesses I also write about in the book is the goddess Inanna, and she's the goddess of heaven and earth who goes into the underworld and is pretty much sacrificed and comes out transformed. And for me, like that myth probably 3 years ago really like shifted my own kind of conception of my witchcraft and really inspired me to like claim the expression and title of like erotic witchcraft, which is really how I describe my personal practice and like the way that I teach about these things. Like I was saying, like this idea of like heaven, earth, and underworld, to me, it's like heaven is right, like our light, our love, this kind of purity. The underworld is our shadows, our sexuality, all the parts of ourselves that have been demonized. And the earth is our body. Like the earth is the macrocosm, right? But our personal reflection of that is our physical self, is our body. And to find the balance between those two things in the flesh, to me, is like very connected to sex work. And Inanna and the goddess that was kind of assimilated after her, Ishtar, were both known as like the whore goddesses or harlots, and were the patronesses of sex workers. And there's even a expression of Aphrodite and Venus who has like, she had like her own kind of like, like sacred, they're called sacred prostitutes, which is like, I think that distinction between like sacred and profane, it can get really muddy. So I just say erotic votaries, which I describe as goddesses or women. There were also men who work with the goddess and honor her through engaging in sexual ritual with people who came to honor the goddess of the temple. So, Venus and Inanna, and even Babylon now, who's a more modern kind of conception of this goddess, they protect and are patronesses of this kind of work. So for me, like, I pray every day to my goddesses before like a session or like a shift or whatever I'm doing. Like I would cleanse myself and pray to her. And like, it's the same way that I feel about just like working with the goddess, like Isis or Set, who's the Egyptian mother goddess. Like I have a relationship, I have a connection, I have a devotion. And because of that, like I am connected to these goddesses all the time. Like it's not just something that happens when I'm at my altar. I can pray to her. I can work with symbols that I've kind of worked into my like psyche and my astral body, and like I can trace her symbol and call upon her, and she's there for me. I always say you have to meet the universe halfway. You have to meet the goddess halfway. Like I'm both protected by a Set or by Babylon, but I also like, am being smart about when I'm doing sex work, whether it's online or not, and like protecting myself too.
Yeah. You have to do the steps in your like present body to make sure that you're safe, and then also call in them. We're talking at the top of the year here, and one of my goals for the year has been to get more into witchcraft and being witchy. I've always like felt this calling to it. I'm a Scorpio, so I was born on Halloween actually.
Stop! I love
Yeah.
Oh, you guys are so powerful.
Yeah. And, actually, my birthday always gets fucked up because I think the veil is like the thinnest then. So I always like see people's like true things, and shit always happens on my birthday. I can't help it. But after reading Goddess Energy, I read about, I created an altar in my room, but I didn't even consciously realize it was an altar. And so since reading Goddess Energy, I really like incorporated your guides and your instructions. So I did that last week and it was really cool. I offered up some fruit and all of these different things, and it was really magical. And I also practiced sex magic for the first time. Yay! So that is when you basically manifest. This was on the Capricorn new moon as well.
Beautiful.
And so I just, was manifesting, and then I basically masturbated in front of my altar, thinking those thoughts. And so for people listening, they might be a little bit confused what sex magic is. Could you tell us what that is and how you can, how that can charge your manifestations?
Yeah. So sex magic isn't like specific to one tradition or one path. It's really like sexuality and spirituality are seen in most traditions. And when Christianity came and all that, the church kind of started killing people, they really separated this idea of flesh and spirit. But sex magic is a way of working with sexual energy to transform your circumstances, your life, or yourself. So it is a way of raising energy by using sexuality and then channeling this to a desired outcome. So you can masturbate. I always suggest masturbating first if you've never done sex magic, just so you have that awareness of the energy in your body yourself. But you can practice sex magic with a partner or partners.
That sounds scary. I honestly, you were like, oh, you can do this. I was like, I don't think I've met somebody yet who I would feel comfortable doing that with.
It's not worth it to rush into with somebody. That's why I always suggest doing it for yourself, because it's just a lot.
You're entangling your souls.
It's very intimate. Yeah. Like you want to trust the person that you're doing sex magic with, and it's like it's so much more powerful to just do it yourself, and then when the right person comes, you'll know, And like I was in that space, like, oh, I really want a sex magic partner, and like it's just worth it to wait and to like have that deep connection to yourself. So
when did you first do sex magic with a partner?
I did it probably in August-ish, 2019.
Okay.
Probably just once. And it was fine. It was like somebody I'm glad I did it with them, but it wasn't somebody, like we didn't ever do it again. And then, my boyfriend and I have done it. And like, that's just like next level, because like we already have such a connection of love and trust.
Yeah.
So, but sex magic is a way of raising energy for a desired outcome. And you can literally masturbate, but you could also do something like self-massage or dancing. It's anything that connects you to your erotic energy and raises the energy. Because in a spell, you want this peak of energy to like send out for your intention. So you can dance, you can chant, but in this case, we're thinking of things that bring us pleasure. We're thinking of our sexuality and our eroticism. So you can do sex magic to heal, to banish. Like if you have, like if you're like, okay, like I have these patterns with love or with the relationships that I'm actually really tired of, and I'm going to continue to do the work to release these old patterns, but I'm going to do sex magic to support that banishing. You could do that.
Oh, and I need that. I keep on attracting alcoholics, so
I understand. Well, maybe do some sex magic and like you can like work. You can do like a ritual like sex magic to release, and then you can do sex magic to call in more supportive habits, patterns instead. Okay. You can also do sex magic to just get in touch with your more like your sexual self as an offering to your sexual self, or even as an offering to like Venus or the goddess, or whatever it is. But pretty much you're just going to do something like masturbate, and as you get to that peak of energy, whether you orgasm or not, like you can be anorgasmic and still practice sex magic. You just want to raise the energy. Once you get to that peak, you focus on whatever it is your intention is. If you're calling in love, if you're calling in really hot, slutty sex, if you're calling in a deeper connection to your sexuality, as you get to that energy, that peak, you focus on that. And then in the afterglow, you just, as much as you can, visualize what you want coming to fruition. And then, you do some aftercare if you want to ground yourself with meditation or a bath by eating some fruit. And yeah, it's pretty much it. It can be as complicated as you want. You can do a whole Kabbalistic ritual, or you can, offer things to the goddess and chant and do this and that, or you can just be like, I'm going to masturbate and have a little quickie with myself and just focus on what I want to call in or an energy I want to embody, right? Like you could be like, I really inspired by the Magician tarot card. And when you orgasm or get as close, you can just stare at the tarot card and like almost visualizing it entering you. There's a lot of ways to fit it into your own magical practice, which is why I think it's such a powerful tool.
Can you overdo like a manifest? Like there's like some things like I specifically want to manifest by the end of the year, and like how often should I be doing, practicing sex magic? Can I overdo it? Because I know that also part of witchcraft is the law of what's it called? Of like, no, you like let it go.
Yeah. So like the law of like least resistance is this idea of like, it's like holding on to a hose really tight. Like the more strongly you hold on, the less the water is going to be able to flow. And I think it kind of depends on what it is. So like my thing with manifesting is that like, I really don't recommend if you like really want a specific person to do sex magic for that specific person. Instead, focusing like literally can write down all the qualities you like about that person and maybe other qualities that you want in a partner or like boyfriend or, hookup buddy, whatever it is. And if that person is meant to be the person that you do this with, it'll come through. Just because other people have free wills, and like, yeah, if they already kind of have those seeds of attraction to you, it might grow, but it's just like way more likely to get messy when you're like really thinking about a specific person. But with manifesting for a goal, I think that like you can, I feel like you don't want to get like too obsessed, right? Like you don't want to like constantly like be doing sex magic about it like every day. But if you're like, oh, you know what, like for like the next 3 months, like on the full moon or the new moon, I'm going to really like focus on manifesting these things, and I'm going to focus on manifesting the different parts of it. Like I'm going to manifest feeling it. I'm going to manifest the actual thing. Like you can like break it up into almost like a bigger ritual, split up into parts. And like, I think that's kind of a really powerful way to go. Or what I really like to do is do like a devotional cycle, or like a devotional, which is like from one lunar phase to another, or for a set period of time, you focus on one intention. So like you can do a devotional to like sluttiness, and for the new moon to the new moon, every day you manifest or do some kind of magic on embracing that part of yourself. So I don't think you can necessarily overdo it, but I do think that it's a balance of like trust and fear. Like, are you doing this manifestation all the time because like doing this work all the time because like you're fearful it's not going to happen? Because if so, like that might be a good time to just like release it and focus on like something like meditation or affirmations, or even like EFT tapping, which is where you like tap on these different kind of like meridian points. It's like acupuncture without the needles, and like do stuff like hypnosis where you're kind of changing like your subconscious, and that way like it's less about like manifesting and more about like trusting,
Yeah, interesting. Now that we have a good understanding of what your craft is today, I want to go back to the beginning, which we touched on. You were born in San Diego and you lived in Woodland Hills until you were about 6. And then you and your family moved to Buffalo, New York. And then you eventually settled in Johns Creek, Georgia, which is known as the Bible Belt. And as you said before, your family is Jewish and Mexican. So I'm curious, what was it like growing up in the Bible Belt?
It was weird. I mean, Johns Creek is a suburb. So like at the end of the day, like it's a suburb. Like there are, like there's Starbuckses and Barnes and Nobles and Free People. There was stuff to do, but also like the only thing to do past 9 o'clock was go to Waffle House. Shout out Waffle House, the best part of the Bible Belt. And I love her so much. But it was weird.
What's your order at Waffle House?
Okay, I always get 2 or 3 eggs, scrambles. It was like, I don't remember what it's called, like with cheese. And then I got tomato slices and a biscuit and usually a waffle.
Delicious. Anyways, go on. I just wanted to know
always
the order.
Coffee. Always coffee.
Yes.
And if I feel like their pies, the chocolate pie. Oh, I miss her. Atlanta as a city, like again, like I was about 45 minutes north, and Johns Creek was like, it was actually like very diverse. Like there was a very large like Korean population, a really large Indian population. Like, so like our school, like there were actually like, it wasn't like just like mostly white, which was really nice. There was a lot of diversity in that way, but like not a lot of like Latino, like Latin kids, and definitely not a lot of like Black students. But it is still the Bible Belt. So like I grew up with like this giant mega church down the street, and like so many kids who had, you know, like purity rings and like went to church every Sunday. Like a lot of people, like, you know, you'd have friends that like thought you were going to hell because you were Jewish. And on top of that, like my sister is a lesbian. She came out in our senior year. I've known I was a witch since I was 12. Again, my mom is from the Jewish community, but she's Mexican and has like a thick Mexican accent. My dad was a rabbi. It was just really like, you know, obviously like I'm white. So it's like, I always had that. Like, it wasn't like I was...
You're passing.
Well, I'm Jewish. So like even my mom is like, we're Mexican, but it's like, I'm not like ethnically Mexican. Like, I'm ethnically just as Ashkenazi as you get, like Eastern European Jew. So like, which is another kind of like weird identity thing. Cause like I grew up speaking Spanish, eating Mexican food. My whole side of my mom's whole side of the family's in Mexico. But like, you know, so my identity has always been like a thing that I've like been kind of, it's been weird. And then also like after moving from the South, like I was there from the time I was 11 till I graduated college when I was 22. Like I'm also Southern. So it's weird. It's just weird. Identity's weird. But, you know, like on one hand, like I'm not going to feel othered like somebody who's not white will, but like I didn't feel like I've always felt too Jewish for the Mexicans and too Mexican for the Jews. Like I felt kind of...
I was just about to say that quote from you.
Yeah. So it was definitely strange, but I'm really grateful. Like Johns Creek is like, you know, it's a nice suburb. It's a good place to raise our family. I met some of my best friends there. And by the time I went to college in South Carolina, like I was just like, fuck it. Like, I'm going to pretend I'm going to school in New York. I'm going to wear whatever the fuck I want. And I definitely, like, I've had, when I was in 11th grade, I got, technically, it wasn't a shave yet, but like I cut off the left side of my hair. Now I get it shaved every couple weeks. It's been like that for...
Over 10 years, right?
Yeah, 13 years, something like that.
Didn't you say that you did that because you saw it on Karl Lagerfeld's
yes, Alice Dalal had her head shaved like this, and I was like, she looks so cute, and I was like, Mom, can I get my hair shaved, have my head shaved? And she's like, no. And I was like, there was this girl in my lit mag class, and she was like, better to ask forgiveness than permission. And I was like, you're so right. And I went and did it, and it was like, for me, it was like my initiation into glamour magic. Like I have covered up my hair once, and it was like the day after I got it done because my mom was like angry at me, but now like she still is like, don't get it shaved all the way. I'm like, I get it shaved to the skin every time, Mom. It's like, it'll grow back.
Can you take us back to that moment when you had it shaved for the first time?
Yeah.
What was going through your head and your body?
I had printed out like from a Word doc photos of like the kind of hairstyle that I wanted. And I went to this place in North Point Mall called Golden Scissors and was like...
The best place to go.
I know, exactly, right? It's better than a Supercuts. So I like went and I had all these photos, like, like folded up Word document pages, and they like cut like a little kind of triangle of my hair. It was like that much. And now it's like, it's pretty much half my head, but it wasn't at the time. And they like cut it pretty long. It was like still a couple inches, but like my hair was like very long at that time. And I paid $5 because they charged me as a bang trim. And I just remember being so excited. Like I just felt so fucking cool. And like, I just remember taking this photo. I had like a flip phone at the time, like huge smile on my face. And it was, I like went to this show afterward and I called my parents and was like, because I also had wanted to dye my hair black and my parents were like, no. And I like called them coming back from this show. It was like probably 10 o'clock at night. I was like, I dyed my hair. Just kidding. I like cut half of it off. And my sister was home. So like they famously yelled at my sister. Oh, no. And she's still like, she's not upset, but like we joke about it now. But
she holds it against you to this day?
Not really, but she's just like, hey, remember when you did that and then Mom and Dad yelled at me? I was like, yeah, I'm so sorry.
It's a sister thing. Yeah, my sister holds stuff against me
like
too.
Whatever. Like we're past it. But yeah, my parents like didn't like it. And like now they see that it's just like part of who I am. And I just also like really recognize the power of a signature look. Like I think it's like you know, if you were like that witch with half like her head shaved, like people would know it's me, which I feel very powerful about. But it was really liberating because it was the first thing that I did that was like outside of my like rebelling in that way. And it was like the first kind of style, like step in my style that I took that was like kind of drastic, you know, like after that, like the day I turned 18, I got my nostril pierced and I'd had some like ear piercings, but like that was really the beginning of my journey of like stepping into myself aesthetically, which is like such a huge part of like for me, like I like one of the most important things in my life is being true to who I am and expressing that. So that was just such like a powerful part of that. And yeah, like it's definitely like I started getting it shaved pretty regularly after that. And then when I was about 20 in college, I started getting it shaved to like the skin. And that's how I still do it. Like I've been going to my same barber at Baxter Finley. Shout out Eric the barber. Love him. He's been shaving the left side of my head since I moved here 7 years ago. I think one other person shaved it because he was out, but like I don't trust anybody else. And you know, when I decided to just wear whatever the fuck I wanted in South Carolina, like it really caused me to have a thick skin and not give a fuck what people think. And like that is something I'm really, really grateful for because like I just dress however I want.
Do you think that like being a quote unquote outsider growing up where you did allowed you to be more rebellious in a way because you were already that, so it like pushed you into your personal style more?
Yeah, I think it's kind of just like I remember being really young, like probably like 9, and realizing that I felt different and being like, I could either, again, like spend my life trying to like fit in and like not succeed, or I could just like be so different that like nobody can fuck with me. And I had this realization, like I have my moon in Scorpio, it's conjunct Jupiter. So it's like very there for me, and like Pluto and my North Node in Scorpio too. So like I have a lot of that energy. And like one of the ways that that manifests for me is that like I've always had to deal with envy and jealousy. And now I'm really grateful for that because I feel like they're huge teachers. And like what I find most of all is like when you're jealous or envious, like jealous specifically, it's like you're not getting your needs met, or there's some part of you that like needs some more self-love and just to be there for yourself. But I realize like there's always going to be somebody prettier or better or like more successful, right? Like quote unquote, but there's nobody else who's me. The more me I am, the more that like nobody else can be me. And like nobody else can, like, even if you try, you're going to look dumb because you're not me. So like, I think that having that perspective, like, you know, like Aquarius is kind of said to be like the rebel without a cause. But for me, it's just like, if it doesn't feel aligned for me, I'm not going to do it. And even if something is like perceived as like out there or weird or outsider or like rebellious, like if it's what is aligned for me, I'm going to do it. So I think it's kind of like a chicken and the egg situation. Like I've always just been interested in things that are like taboo and like always been fascinated by that kind of stuff. Like whether it's witchcraft or like kink or, you know, just doing things my own way. And like, I think being able to be true to myself in a place that doesn't support it, like the South, just meant that when I moved to LA, it was like a million times easier to just wear what I wanted and do what I wanted because literally nobody gives a fuck here. And the people that do like aren't my people. So
yeah, exactly. You just avoid those people. Something about jealousy that you just mentioned. You've had to deal with jealousy and envy your whole life. How do you handle that in a non-monogamous relationship?
That's a really good question. And I think the first thing is to just like not shut it off. Like for me, like I honestly like did not think I was going to be somebody who could like be in a non-monogamous relationship because of my envy and jealousy. And what I realized is that like actually like I really don't care. Like obviously like I'm not going to date somebody who is not practicing safe sex, who doesn't communicate with me. Like non-monogamy forces you to have a lot more open and intense conversations that you wouldn't have when you're monogamous, which I feel like is like, I'm just really grateful to like be with, my boyfriend's a Gemini and I love Gemini men because like we just can talk and they're freaks in bed, which I love. But like because of that, like we have to have conversations that like if we were monogamous, we could probably avoid. So there's already this level of like trust that's necessary. But I think that the main things like the thing is, like, even when I was in like when I was like in situationships, I'd get envious and jealous, and like I would feel like even more insecure then because like I didn't know what was going on. But like now, like when the way that I deal with it is like if I'm feeling jealous, it's like, well, going back to what I was saying, I was like, I realize that it's like I don't really care what the other person's doing if I'm getting my needs met. It's when I'm not getting my needs met that I get jealous, because why are you spending time if I'm not having my need, like with somebody else, if I'm not having my needs met?
Yeah.
So this person that I follow on Instagram, named Christine, their handle is like Damonum X, wrote a really great zine called, I think it's like, I don't remember what it's called, but it's about polyamory. And, you know, like they also like they wrote a really good Substack article about like jealousy can either mean that like you're not getting your needs met, or that somebody's not respecting you, or that and I'm probably really butchering this, or that like there's something within yourself that like you need to just like work on and find more confidence in. And what I realize is like now, like most of the time when I'm jealous of somebody else, it's like it's not a them thing, it's a me thing. It's like something in myself that I'm like, oh, like actually that's like a self-esteem thing that like it was a blind spot that I didn't know I had. Like, oh, like my partner's girlfriend is like this way, and like I don't feel like I'm like that way, and like I should be. And like that word should is like very toxic. Whenever that word comes up, it's like an expectation that you have for yourself or that other people have for you that's like not necessarily true. Like the current therapist I have, who I love, like one of the things I'm really grateful for was she's like, you should remove the word should from your language because it's not helping you. Like it's like an outside expectation. So I think for me, when I feel jealousy, like I process it. Like I take a bath, I journal, or I just spend time contemplating and be like, okay, like, am I jealous because like, am I getting my needs met? Like, am I feeling like, you know, like I'm not being listened to, or I'm not having enough time spent? And like, I'm very grateful. Like that's not the case. Like I am getting my needs met in my relationship. So it's usually just like a place of insecurity that I didn't know I had because it just wasn't there. And I'm really like, I find that when I give myself, you know, like the reassurance, or I give myself the time to process and to like remind myself again that like I am who I am, and like I'm not somebody else, and that's why my boyfriend loves me, and like that's why I love me, because I'm true to who I am. Like it makes it easier. And you know, like a lot of the time it's like reframing, like, oh, it's like not something that this other person did, it's something that they reflected within me that I needed to see to work on and grow and be more confident in myself.
Something that you were just talking about is the power of language, which you've talked a lot about in your work. Language and words are really important to you because you're a witch and they do have power. So removing certain words that bring you down is really important in your work. And language also ties back to your grandmother, Rose. As we talked about before, you have Jewish ancestry, and you wrote that you had over 70 family members in concentration camps. But I want to talk about Rose, and I thought that you could read this passage from your first book, Inner Witch, about her.
Part of my journey with witchcraft, specifically with fashion magic, is very personal. Fashion and fashion magic are in my blood. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for my family's relationship with clothing and textiles. My paternal grandmother, Rose Weiss, survived 3 years in the concentration camps because of her work as a seamstress. As fate would have it, she had the same name as a head seamstress's niece in Auschwitz, and, because she was actually trained in sewing, was able to stay in the seamstress's quarters at the camp, sewing and repairing uniforms for the Nazis and their families. She was able to get her work for her sister Edith as well. She wrote a memoir about her experiences, and from it, I learned that her father and uncle owned a fur business.
It's really moving how you both are writers.
Yeah. Well, she was a poet too, and I think I knew that she had a memoir, but I really didn't find out like the details until after she passed away when I was 18. So, but I think it was actually Steven Spielberg started like the Holocaust. I don't know if it's a Holocaust Foundation, but he worked on archiving a lot of the stories of Holocaust survivors. So both my grandma's memoir and her book of poetry are archived online.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What did you learn about her and then yourself through her memoir?
Yeah, my grandma I of course like did her birth chart not recently, maybe a few years ago, and she was very, very Virgo. And Virgo is a sign of the Virgin and being independent to oneself. And my grandma was just like so fucking feisty and strong. And I think just like her uncle and her father owned fur business. And then like even on my mom's side, like my grandma's parents owned like a little store with like gloves and scarves. And then my grandma's father and his brother started a zipper factory. So like there's a lot of connection to like, you know, clothing on both sides. But I think the main thing I learned from my grandma was just like her resilience and her strength. Like she met my grandpa when they were both training like to be the first round of the IDF, which is a whole other thing that I don't want to talk about right now. But she met him because he was training her how to load anti-missile cannons or tanks. And like the first thing he said was, "Cadet, your fly's unbuttoned," because women back then weren't used to wearing pants. I just learned about like her strength and her resilience, like after being in the camp for literally 3 years. And like she was like, there were like men who were like probably gonna assault her, and she like fucking, I think, like hit somebody with a shoe and like ran away. And they were like on, you know, like the camps, before the camps were liberated, the SS guards and the Nazis like made everybody do like the death march, where they would just like march them. And if you were in the back, there were dogs. And if you know, like you just pretty much marched until you died, unless you were lucky enough to survive. And she and her sister and somebody else were able to like flee and like find safety. And she, you know, like was able to have a family. And like, wow. You know, after like she was like 20 when she went through that, like she was really young when she was sent to the camps. And the fact that she was able to just like, I think for me, it was just like the fact she was able to have a family and like how much that meant for her and like how much it meant to her to like have grandchildren. Like, it was just like really, really just like touching, and like just like knowing her strength and her perseverance like is really moving. And she was such a good writer. Like, and she also like, her mom was murdered when she was a baby with an axe by like her nanny's boyfriend, like just had gone through so much. Her like stepmom like was abusive. It was just, so just like knowing that strength, I think for me, like, and this is kind of something that I feel is both like a generational trauma thing and something that like children of people that have gone through some kind of like genocide or something like really tough, like that I've recognized since I was little, was like, I literally should not be here. Like if everything went to plan, like my family should not be here. I've always just had that deep intrinsic recognition that like my life is a gift. And for me, like the way that I honor my grandma's memory and my grandpa's memory and like my family and my ancestry is by like fully living my life in spite of people who want to keep me small. Cause like my grandma, like you don't go through something like that unaffected. Like, you know, like they were kind of always like, keep your head down, blend in. Like my dad like has his own trauma from being raised by parents who were in concentration camps, right? They like, and you know, like we're now just starting to have these conversations around trauma and PTSD and all that stuff. And like, I feel like now, because like I've been lucky enough to be in therapy, and like my parents both have gone through a lot of trauma and like have done so much work to like not pass that down to my sister and I have like a responsibility to like live this life fully. And like on one hand, it's like I'm like so aware of my mortality that like I'm never gonna do something like go fucking spelunking or like jump out of an airplane. I'm also really scared of heights and drops. So
I feel the same way.
I'm
those
good,
scooters in LA. I'm not getting on one of
never.
those.
I'm never getting on a bird scooter. No helmet. If it's neither versus the road's gonna win. Like, because I'm like literally Alex and I joke about this. We're like, my family did not survive the Holocaust for me to die doing something stupid. Yeah. Like I'm just like so aware that like this gift is like just like this life is a gift, and like for me, like I honor that like legacy by like fully living my truth, because like my family was killed and was attempted to be killed because of their religious beliefs. So like for me, like being able to talk about witchcraft openly, to be able to talk about like sluttiness or sex work or like whatever it is, and to not fear persecution is like such a gift. And I'm just like, I do it. I do it for Rose. She's like definitely one of my guardian angels. So I love that you brought her up. It means a lot.
Yeah, of course. Do you feel like you're picking up where she left off?
I think in a different way. Yeah. I think that like just Like she passed away when I was a senior in high school.
18,
so like,
yeah.
she was 90. She lived a really beautiful, full life. And she actually, like, when I first moved to LA, I moved not too far away from her, like maybe like a 5 or 10 minute drive from like where she used to live in, like what is now, like North Hollywood. It was North Hollywood. Now it's considered, not Studio City, like next door. I forgot what it's called. But needless to say, like, I feel like I'm kind of like honoring her just through like writing and sharing my story and sharing her story. You know, it's like the idea that like you keep somebody's memory alive when you talk about them, and kind of like I just, you know, like whether my books ever got a print or not, like part of like that legacy will be immortalized, which I feel like is like such a gift to be able to do and share and say.
How do you feel her protecting you?
I don't know. I just feel like she's like supporting me energetically when I'm like doing things that are like true to who I am. Like she was just like very fiery and like kind and like very strong-willed, and I feel like when I'm using my voice and when I'm doing things that are right for me, she's there. And I don't like being on airplanes, again, heights and drops. I'm pretty sure I was chucked off a cliff in a past life as a sacrifice. That's like my theory.
Oh, interesting.
So like I always will like imagine like angels like around me, and I can always like talk to her, and like I just feel her spirit. Like I just feel like she's there. And for me, like also like roses as a flower, like my favorite ever. Like I love roses. I'm always buying my goddesses roses as offerings, and I love rose medicine, and I love taking baths with roses and just like rose perfume. Like I love roses. So I feel like also like working with that spirit that's just both so soft and protected is just like a way of like honoring her as well.
That's really beautiful.
Thank you.
You write a lot about the rose in your work. And when I do, you know, a quick search in your books, it's always like 100 different roses. So that's definitely true that you embody her energy all the time through the rose. And I just want to thank you so much for everything today and for all of your work, and for continuing to enlighten me and enlighten all of us. And how I like to finish all of these conversations is by asking what a slut means to you.
I love it. And also thank you so much for like such a well-researched podcast. Like I really appreciate you like digging into all the different parts of my stories and like trying sex magic and all of that. Like it means a lot to just like have shared that magic with you, and hopefully like inspired you to connect to a part of yourself in like a new way. So I really like, this means a lot, and this was a really special conversation.
Thank you.
And a slut to me is somebody who owns their sexuality and lives their sexuality without worrying about how it affects, like not how it affects, because obviously like we're, you know, we practice safe sex and we have conversations, but who lives their sexuality and who embraces their sexuality in a way that's resonant to them, regardless of what people are expecting or projecting. Like it is somebody who's independent in their sexuality, who knows the power of it, and who owns it in a way that is aligned with who they are, regardless of if they have a lot of sex or no sex or are dressing outwardly slutty or not. Like slut is a state of mind to me, and it's a way to move through the world connected to your sexuality in spite of a culture that wants you to stay small and stay in a specific lane.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and stay slutty.
Yes, you too.
Sluts, you can pre-order Goddess Energy wherever you find your books. It's $18, and it's actually on sale for $16 on Amazon. And I think that's a pretty good deal for a spiritual awakening. You can also listen to Gaby's podcast, Love, Lust, and Magic, wherever you're listening to this right now. And also make sure you give her some more love on Instagram and Twitter by following her at Gaby Herstik. Also, make sure you're following at Slut Podcast and at Caitlin Dryden on Instagram and at SLT Pod on TikTok. Subscribe to Slut Podcast on YouTube, and you can also watch this episode there and on Spotify. If you'd like to purchase a Slut sticker pack, go to slut-pod.com. That's slut-pod.com. Links to all these and more are in the description to this episode. Slut is created and hosted by me, Caitlin Dryden. I edited and engineered this episode. Graphics are by Keisha Gargarello. Song is by me, but with some help from Corinne Davis and Michael Mason. And thank you for getting slutty with me. I'll be back in a few weeks with a new solo episode. So keep your vibrators charged and your spirits up. Bye, sluts!